Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamti Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistike. So continuing with the discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 6, Prahlad instructs his demoniac schoolmates. Text number 5 onwards. So Prahlad Maharaj is further speaking to his friends. Tato yatet kushala kshemaya bhavamashutaha shariram porusham yavam na vipadyet pushkalam. Therefore, while in material existence, bhavam ashrita, a person fully competent to distinguish right from wrong must endeavor to achieve the highest goal of life as long as the body is stout and strong and is not embarrassed by dwindling. So that's why this self-realization of spiritual life should start when we are young, not when we are old. As stated by Prahlad Maharaj at the beginning of this chapter, Kaumara Acharit Pragya. The word pragya refers to one who is experienced and who can distinguish right from wrong. Such a person should not waste his energy and valuable human lifetime simply working like a cat or dog to develop his economic condition. For one word in this verse, there are two readings, bhavam ashrita and bhayam ashrita. But accepting the meaning of either of them will bring one to the same conclusion. Bhayam ashrita indicates that the materialistic way of life is always fearful because at every step there is danger. Materialistic life is full of anxieties and fear, bhayam. Similarly, accepting the reading as bhavam ashrita, the word bhavam refers to unnecessary trouble and problems. For want of Krishna consciousness, one is put into bhavam, being perpetually embarrassed by birth, death, old age, and disease. Thus, one is surely full of anxieties. So, bhayam ashrita or bhavam ashrita, as Prabhupada explains, basically it all means the life in the material world. And it's full of bhaya, fear of all the issues, all the problems, or in the material world, it just goes on sansar of birth, old age, disease, and death. So this is what Prahlad Maharaj is saying. This is material existence. So, so one who knows what is right and what is wrong, he should try to achieve the highest goal. Human society should be divided into a social system of Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. But everyone can engage in devotion service. If one wants to live without devotion service, his status as a Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra certainly has no meaning. It is said, sthana dbhrashta patanti yada. Whether one is in a higher or lower division, one certainly falls down for want of Krishna consciousness. A sane man, therefore, is always fearful of falling from his position. This is a regulative principle. One should not fall from his exalted position. The highest goal of life can be achieved as long as one's body is stout and strong. We should therefore live in such a way that we keep ourselves always healthy and strong in mind and intelligence, so that we can distinguish the goal of life from a life full of problems. A thoughtful man must act in this way, learning to distinguish right from wrong and thus attain the goal of life. And this is what Prahlad Maharaj says. So when the body is strong, that is when we should get into this path of spiritual consciousness or Krishna consciousness. Because then we can distinguish right from wrong, and then we can work hard also. Not when we are old. Generally people say, oh, why you're doing this bhakti, all this right now? Do it when you're old. Right now it's time for you to go and enjoy life. Go to clubs and bars and movies and go with your friends and do all sorts of nonsense. Actually, there is no pleasure there until we come to this pleasure of bhakti. Like today, Rajiv Prabhu and I myself, we went to the Jagannath Snan Yatra organized by, there's a Jagannath temple here, a little far for me, but anyway. So, and it's a small temple. It's a small old building. They're trying to build a new temple here, but it's going to be sometime, depends upon Lord Jagannath. But anyway, we were sitting there and doing kirtan, and then Aarti went on. So many things were going on. Snan happened. And that's what we were discussing afterwards, having prasadam. We were thinking, this is a real pleasure. People just like to go to clubs and spend so much of money and drink whatever nonsense and do whatever nonsense, and they think they're having fun. I said, but this is what the soul is really looking for. This, but it's all up to the preachers to bring people to Krishna consciousness. That's all we have to do. Bring them, introduce them to the right happiness, which once introduced to, once we get sanskara in, we just cannot give up. There's nothing else will please us more. But that can only happen when we are young. In old age, our mind, our habits are already conditioned. It's very difficult to change in old age. At least when we are young, we are still very tender, and mind is not that fixed. Condition is not conditioned. Habits are not formed yet. So we can adapt to new things. And that's why Prahlad Maharaj is saying it's very important to, when we are old, when we are young, then we take up this process. Now he gives an analysis of our life, how much time we spend where. Punso varsha shatam hi ayus taddardham chajitatma nishvalam yadaso ratriyam shete andham prapitas tamaha. Every human being has a maximum duration of life of 100 years. But for one who cannot control his senses, half of those years are completely lost because at night he sleeps 12 hours, being covered by ignorance. Therefore, such a person has a lifetime of only 50 years. So those who don't have any control, they sleep. I've seen people sleeping 10, 12 hours. Lord Brahma, a human being, and an ant all live for 100 years, but their lifetime of 100 years are different from one another. This world is a relative world, and its relative moments of time are different. Thus, the 100 years of Brahma are not the same as the 100 years of a human being. From Bhagavad Gita, we can understand that Brahma's daytime of 12 hours equals 4.3 million times 100 years, 1,000 years. Thus, the word Shatam, or 100 years, are relatively different according to time, person, and circumstances. As far as human beings are concerned, the calculation given here is right for the general public. Although one has a maximum of 100 years of life, by sleeping, one loses 50 years. Eating, sleeping, sex life, and fear are the 4 bodily necessities. But to utilize the full duration of life, a person desiring to advance in Krishna consciousness must reduce these activities. That will give him an opportunity to fully use his lifetime. So that's the whole idea where we should use our time. But we waste so much of time. So much of time is wasted. Mugdhasya balya kaishore kridito yati vinchati jaryagrasta dehasya yati kalpasya vinchati. In the tender age of childhood, when everyone is bewildered, one passes 10 years. So until 10 years, we have no idea what we are doing. We're just blabbering around and don't know what is right and what is wrong. Similarly, in boyhood, engaged in sporting and playing, one passes another 10 years. In this way, 20 years are wasted. Similarly, in old age, when one is invalid, unable to perform even material activities, one passes another 20 years wastefully. So without Krishna consciousness, one wastes 20 years in childhood and boyhood and another 20 years in old age. When one cannot perform any material activities and is full of anxiety about what is to be done by his sons and grandsons and how one's estate should be protected. Half of these years are spent in sleep. Furthermore, one wastes another 30 years sleeping at night during the rest of his life. The 70 out of 100 years are wasted by a person who does not know the aim of life and how to utilize this human form. So 30 years, because from 100, if we take out 40, so 60 years are left, and half of that 60 years is 30 years. Durapurena kamena mohena cha baliyasa shesham diheshu saktasya pramattasya payatihi. One whose mind and senses are uncontrolled becomes increasingly attached to family life because of insatiable lusty desires and very strong illusion. In such a madman's life, the remaining years are also wasted because even during those years, he cannot engage himself in devotional service. This is the account of 100 years of life. Although in this age, a lifetime of 100 years is generally not possible. Even if one has 100 years, the calculation is that 50 years are wasted in sleeping, 20 in childhood and boyhood, and 20 years in invalidity. This leaves only a few more years, but because of too much attachment to household life, those years are also spent with no purpose, without God consciousness. Therefore, one should be trained to be perfect brahmachari in the beginning of life and then to be perfect in sense control, following the regulative principles, if one becomes a householder. From household life, one is ordered to accept vanaprastha life and go to the forest and then accept sannyas. That is the perfection of life. From the very beginning of life, those who are ajitendriya, who cannot control their senses, are educated only for sense gratification, as we have seen in the Western countries. Thus, the entire duration of a life of even 100 years is wasted and misused, and at the time of death, one transmigrates to another body, which may not be human. At the end of 100 years, one who has not acted as a human being in the life of tapasya, austerity, and penance must certainly be embodied again in a body, like those of cats, dogs, hogs. Therefore, this life of lusty desires and sense gratification is extremely risky. So how much time we waste in our day, in our life, which should be utilized properly in the service of Krishna for self-realization. But we try to engage everything in sense gratification. Somehow we want to enjoy, somehow we want to be happy. So there was a nice story I read. So there was a very, very poor man. He was begging on the street, and very poor, young man, but very poor. And then a rich man happened to pass by. So this poor man, he asked for some money or something. So rich man stopped. He said, no, 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 wait. Why should I give you money? I should make you a business partner. And the poor man, he was surprised and he said, are you joking? He said, no, 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 I'm serious. Let's go to my office. So he took this poor man to his office and then had the business. So what was the business? The rich man said, well, I have a plot of land. So you can work on it, and then whatever is produced and whatever profit is made, we'll just split, we'll divide. So what should be the ratio? The rich man said, see, I'm already very rich. I don't need any money. So I'll take only 10% and you keep 90%. You just work hard. Okay. And the poor man was very happy. See, ultimately, he got something that he can make money off of and then can live his life peacefully. So he worked hard and made a good crop, and then they sold it in the market, and he made lots of money. So then the rich man came. He said, well, where is my share? But now that poor man who was originally poor, he said, I worked hard. I'm the one who worked hard on this property, on this business. Why should I give him any share? He did not do anything. So he was telling, oh, well, there were some losses and there were some expenses and this and that. So the share is very low. Profit wasn't there, hardly any profit. So rich man said, well, I have seen all the books. So don't cheat with me. Whatever is due to me, just give it me. That's it. So this is our life, actually. The poor man is us, a living entity, and the rich man is God. And he has given us this body, given us this time that we can utilize in his service. But we try to enjoy our senses and we forget him. And he said, just give me 10% of your time. I'll be happy. If we can give more, he will be very, very happy. But if we can give only 10%, 2 hours, 40 minutes, that's all. 1.5 hours for chanting and some time for class, reading, or some other services, that is good enough. But once we get this body, we forget. We forget, why did we get this human form of life? And we think this is just for just eat, drink, and be merry. That's all. Ko griheshu pumana sattam atmanam ajitendriyah sneha pashar dridar baddham utsahet vimochitum. What person too attached to household life due to being unable to control his senses can liberate himself? An attached householder is bound very strongly by ropes of affection for his family, wife, children, and other relatives. Prahlad Maharaj's first proposal was Kaumara Acharit Pragya. One who is sufficiently intelligent should use the human form of life from the very beginning of life. In other words, from the tender age of childhood to practice the activities of devotional service, giving up all other engagements. Dharmana Bhagavata means the religious principle of reviving our relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For this purpose, Krishna personally advises Sarva Dharman Parityaja, give up all other duties and just surrender unto me. While in the material world, we manufacture so many duties in the name of so many isms, but our actual duty is to free ourselves from the cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease. For this purpose, one must first be liberated from material bondage, and especially from household life. Household life is actually a kind of license for a materially attached person by which to enjoy sense gratification under regulative principles. Otherwise, there is no need to enter household life. So, well, of course, Prahlad Maharaj is a brahmachari and he's speaking about the household life. Later on, he will speak further. Household life as a grihastha, it can lead to conditioning of bounding or entanglement, and at the same time, it can lead to liberation. If we serve each other in the house and together we understand we have to grow spiritually, and there should be a mood of service in the house, in the family, then everybody in the family can make advance. Before entering household life, one should be trained as a brahmachari, living under the care of a guru, whose place is known as the Gurukul. Brahmachari Gurukule Vasandanto Guru. From the very beginning, a brahmachari is trained to sacrifice everything for the benefit of the Guru. A brahmachari is advised to go begging alms door to door, addressing all women as mother, and whatever he collects goes to the benefit of the Guru. In this way, he learns how to control his senses and sacrifice everything for the Guru. When he is fully trained, if he likes, he is allowed to marry. Thus, he is not an ordinary grihastha who has learned only how to satisfy his senses. A trained grihastha can actually give up household life and go to the forest to become increasingly enlightened in spiritual life, and at last take sannyas. Prahlad Maharaj explained to his father that to be freed from all material anxieties, one should go to the forest. Hitvatma patam griham andakupam. One should give up his household, which is a place for going further and further down into the darkest regions of material existence. The first advice, therefore, is that one must give up household life. However, if one prefers to remain in the dark mill of household life because of uncontrolled senses, he becomes increasingly entangled by ropes of affection for his wife, children, servants, house, money, and so on. Such a person cannot attain liberation from material bondage. Therefore, children should be taught from the very beginning of life to be first-class brahmacharis. Then it will be possible for them to give up household life in the future. So somewhere else also Prabhupada said, a good brahmachari makes a good grihastha because he understands the goal of life. He understands if I get married, the marriage is not for my enjoyment, it's for the service of Krishna. So the proper training is required. And brahmacharya and grihas and one person sannyas ashrams and Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, they don't depend upon the birth. They depend upon guna and karma. What kind of qualities we have and what kind of work we are doing. So proper training is very, very important. And then a grihastha, and of course, besides training, there has to be support structure for every ashram, and so that we all can live peacefully, happily together, and make progress. That's the purpose of life. And whether any ashram we enter, whether it is brahmachari or grihastha, one plus sannyas ashram, there should be a support mechanism helping the devotees. To return home, back to Godhead, one must be completely free from material attachment. Therefore, Bhakti Yoga means Vairagya Vidya, the art that can help one develop a distaste for material enjoyment. By rendering devotional service unto the personality of Godhead Shri Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. If one engages in devotional service from the very beginning of life, he easily attains Vairagya Vidya or Asakti, Asakti, detachment, and becomes Jitendriya, the controller of his senses. One who perfectly engages in devotion service is therefore called Goswami or Swami, master of the senses. Unless one is master of the senses, he should not accept the renounced order of life, sannyas. A strong inclination for sense enjoyment is a cause of the material body. Therefore, without full knowledge, one cannot be unattached to material enjoyment. But as long as one is not in that position, one is not fit to return home back to Godhead. So full knowledge, full practice, training, everything is required to make progress in any ashram, actually. And for sannyas, Prabhupada is so strict here. Unless one is master of the senses, he should not accept the renounced order of life, sannyas. को अन्वर्थ तृष्णं विसृजेत प्राणेभ्यो अपि य ईप्सितः यम क्रीणात् यस्सुभिः प्रेष्ठः तस्करः सेवको वणिक. Money is so dear that one conceives of money as being sweeter than honey. Therefore, who can give up the desire to accumulate money, especially in the household life? Thieves, professional servants, or soldiers and merchants try to acquire money even by risking their very dear lives. So this is how important money is. And just like somebody said, the reality of the world is what? People come and go. People come and go, but the money stays. So money is more important than people then. How money can be dearer than life is indicated in this verse. Thieves may enter the house of a rich man to steal money at the risk of their lives. Because of trespassing, they may be killed by guns or attacked by watchdogs, but still they try to commit burglary. Why do they risk their lives? Only to get some money. Similarly, a professional soldier is recruited in the army and he accepts such service with the risk of dying on the battlefield only for the sake of money. Well, we can say the soldier maybe is doing it for the sake of the country. But Prabhupada writes, he does it only for the sake of money. In the same way, merchants go from one country to another on boats at the risk of their lives, or they dive into the water of the sea to collect pearls and valuable gems. That is particularly proved, and everyone will admit that money is sweeter than honey. So honey is sweet, very, very sweet, but money is even more sweeter, more sweet. Money is sweeter. Why? Because to get this money, one can even risk his life. And this is just a legal way of working. If there could be an illegal way, then there is definitely more risk to life to make that kind of money. One may risk everything to acquire money, and this is especially true of rich men who are too attached to household life. Formerly, of course, the members of the higher caste, the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas, everyone but the Shudras were trained in the Gurukul to adhere to a life of renunciation and sense control by practicing brahmacharya and mystic yoga. Then they were allowed to enter household life. There have consequently been many instances in which great kings and emperors have given up household life. Although they were extremely opulent and were the masters of the kingdom, they could give up all their possessions because they were trained early as brahmacharis. So kings, many kings in the past, they've just given up the kingdom. They just put on one dhoti and kopin and went to the forest. to find the Lord. Prahlad Maharaj's advice is therefore very appropriate. Kaumara Acharita Pragya. One who is sufficiently intelligent should use the human form of body from the very beginning of life. In other words, from the tender age of childhood to practice the activities of devotion service, giving up all other engagements. Human body is most rarely achieved, and although temporary like other bodies, it is meaningful because in human life one can perform devotion service. Even a slight amount of sincere devotional service, can give one complete perfection. Human society should take advantage of this instruction. So the complete perfection one can get is the perfection from falling down to the lower species of life. And this is what Prahlad Maharaj is saying. From the tender age of 5 years, he should start practicing. Text 11 through 13. Katham priyaya anukampitaya sangam rahasyam ruchiranscha mantra suhritsu tat snehasita shishunam kalaksharanam anrakta chittaha putran smaransta duhitre hridaya bhratrin sasurva pitro chodino grihan manogyo rupi parichadanscha vrittischa kulya pashu pritya vargan tyajat koshas kridi vehmanaha karmani lobhad vitripta kamaha opastya javam bahumanyamanaha katham virajyeta duranta moha. How can a person who is most affectionate to his family, the core of his heart, being always filled with their pictures, give up their association? Specifically, a wife is always very kind and sympathetic and always pleases her husband in a solitary place. Who could give up the association of such a dear and affectionate wife? Small children talk in broken language, very pleasing to hear, and their affectionate father always thinks of the sweet words. How could he give up their association? One's elderly parents and one's sons and daughters are also very dear. A daughter is especially dear to her father, and while living at her husband's house, she is always in his mind. Who could give up that association? Aside from this, in household affairs, there are many decorated items of household furniture, and there are also animals and servants. Who could give up such comforts? The attached householder is like a silkworm, which weaves a cocoon in which it becomes imprisoned, unable to get out. Similarly, for the satisfaction of two important senses, the genitals and the tongue, one is bound by material conditions. How can one escape? So very nice verses Prahlad Maharaj is saying. It's so difficult to get out of this bondage when the wife is so sweet and nice and serving, and the children are running around speaking broken language, and anybody gets attracted to children like this. And then the old parents are there in the house. So how can anybody give up that association? Very, very difficult. In household affairs, the first attraction is a beautiful and pleasing wife who increases household attraction more and more. One enjoys his wife with two prominent sense organs, namely the tongue and the genitals. The wife speaks very sweetly. This is certainly an attraction. Then she prepares very palatable foods to satisfy the tongue. And when the tongue is satisfied, one gains a strength in the other sense organs, especially the genitals. Just the wife gives pleasure in sexual intercourse. Household life means sex life. Yan methnadi grimedi sukhamitucha. This is encouraged by the tongue. Then there are children. A baby gives pleasure by speaking sweet words in broken language. And when the sons and daughters are grown up, one becomes involved in their education and marriage. Then there are one's own father and mother to be taken care of. And one becomes connected with one becomes concerned with the social atmosphere and with pleasing his brothers and sisters. A man becomes increasingly entangled and rich in household affairs, so much so that leaving them becomes almost impossible. Thus, the household becomes a grihamandakupa, a dark well into which the man has fallen. For such a man to get out is extremely difficult unless he is helped by a strong person. The spiritual master who helps a fallen person with the strong rope of spiritual instructions. A fallen person should take advantage of this rope, and then the spiritual master or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, will take him out of the dark well. Other than that, it's just close to impossible for one to give up everything and then take shelter of Guru. That's why Prabhupada had made it simple. You don't have to give up anything. Of course, those who are ready, those who want to very high degree that extent, they can. But if one is a householder, he has so many duties to perform. So generally, it's not recommended for a householder to give up. It just, after one takes care of his duties, or while taking care of the duties, one can carry on with devotional service. Self-realization doesn't stop if one is a householder. No, it carries on. But the distractions are there. Many distractions are there. But at the same time, there can be help also from the husband or wife. So it just one has to see what's the best course of action for that person is. So I guess I'll stop here today also. See anybody has any questions or comments. Okay, so you all have a safe and wonderful day. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Ram.
Hare Krishna, Jai Shri Ram.
Hare Krishna.